about how you played such a huge role in it to guide these men to write this document, something that had never been written before in the history of man, Lord, that we just love that you've placed us in this country, Lord. We thank you for that. We ask that you be with Bill as he teaches us tonight, Lord, and that our spirit just be open to what we're learning, Lord. We thank you and we love you. Amen. I'm going to go make copies.
Okay, we're going to get some copies of the repaired schedule. There was a couple other errors in there. I noticed there's other three making it, so we fixed those too. Tonight, we're going to do a couple of things, and the first one is who can name the 5 rights in the First Amendment? I'm giving you the first one. 5 rights in the First
Freedom
Amendment.
of press.
Pardon me?
Freedom of press.
That's one too.
Assembly.
Religion, press.
Assembly. Assembly, that's good. Freedom of assembly. Right.
Assembly. Right. Speech. How about
Petition.
press?
Petition.
Assembly. And the last one is the hardest. This is the one nobody remembers.
Petition.
And the reason that's so hard to remember because people don't talk like that. Petition the government for redress of grievances. And I just tell people, I give you a right to complain. And we got elected officials that you need to complain to. So, anyway, the First Amendment reads, Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or the press, or the right of the people to peaceably assemble, and to petition our government to redress of grievances. The thing that people forget sometimes is the word before assemble. Peaceably. Peaceably.
It's not on. Just stand still with it.
Okay.
Okay, talk.
Okay, officer.
You're used to that, aren't you?
I am. My brother was a cop.
All right, got it now. Go ahead and talk.
1, 2, 3.
That's good.
Okay. Okay, so that's the first thing. I just wanted to check in. What have you learned up to this point? This is our 4th week. And what have you learned at this point that you didn't know before?
How far we've gotten away from founding fathers.
Yep. That's one of the things.
Oh, thank you.
What is it, sir? Anybody up there? Okay. We have been part of what you just referred to about it's people don't know their history anymore. There's a very good reason it's not taught. The things we're going to talk about tonight, you will not hear in history class because they're afraid somebody will get their feelings hurt and become a lawsuit. But the ramifications of being ignorant about history is bad enough, but when it is done purposefully, that's criminal. That's just criminal. No. You've heard a lot about critical race theory, I'm sure. You've heard about all that that's going on in our schools today. I think we're going to touch on that next week because I think it's important to know about it. But the revisionist histories are all around us. First one was in 1940-something by a guy by the name of Beard. And he was on the revisionist history gig. The 1619 Project and the Zen Project is about getting away from the ideas that America is what America is. And are any of you familiar with Howard Zinn? Have you ever heard of him before? Well, Howard wrote a textbook in the early 80s. I think it came out in 80 or 81. It was used in almost every high school in the United States. And it was given to them free. And It is a complete revisionist history. And he was, it's unusual. He was an Air Force guy. And he came out of service very bitter for some reason and was really saying terrible things about America and everything about the slavery. And if you really read about slavery in this country, you'll know it didn't start here. It didn't start here. Slave's been around longer than Egypt. So that was a worldwide thing, and we were the second country to do away with it. England was first. And but there's so much history in just that part alone that needs to be recognized, so that people aren't thinking about that it's all about slavery. What we don't know in history, and we'll talk about Tocqueville a little bit later, when the past no longer illuminates the future, the spirit walks in darkness. And that is about the most accurate statement I can find about that. It is, if we don't know our history, if we don't know where we came from and where we're going, then how do you know without the plan? So, again, I showed this last week. It was one of my favorite slides because it just infuriates me to come and see it. Old dead white guys, and I told you last week that the average age of our founding fathers was about 44. And the person who really skewed that was Benjamin Franklin. He was about 80 at the time. And so, but that's that they didn't really care about the Constitution or the Declaration or the Union. They just cared about money, feathering their own pockets. And that simply wasn't true. I don't know if you've ever heard or seen the Paul Harvey short video of him talking about the founders and how much they lost and what they sacrificed. Hi guys. In going through the revolution. But there is not one single thing happening today that couldn't have been prevented by the study and the knowledge of our history. If people would read our history, they would know what's coming. Our lives and our culture are being changed and cultivated by ignorance. And what else? It's just, we're not doing it. Okay, tonight, these are the 6 immutable principles that we talked about in the Declaration. And one, there's a fixed moral standard of right and wrong, and it establishes absolute truth. Okay? When you have fixed parameters, you can establish truth. The acknowledgement that there is a divine creator. The fact that inalienable rights come from God. Government exists to protect inalienable rights. That's the only purpose for government. It is not to do anything else. Consent of the governed. That's us. And we are an important part of that, because if we don't exercise our consent, then what is our purpose? What is our purpose? And the right of people to make changes. The last part of the Declaration, we have the right to revolution, if need be. And Jefferson says, things should not be done for light and transient causes. Before we pick up a weapon, we should really think about what we're doing. Mm-hmm. Now, Baron de Montesquieu gave us something very important. He gave us the separation of powers. That's where the founders got this from Montesquieu. And he said government should be set up so that no man need be afraid of another. Okay? But what he said about education, there are 3 educations. He says we receive 3 educations, one from our parents, one from our schoolmasters, and the other one from the world. And he said the third one contradicts all the first 2. Okay, education, and this is why we need to read. Reading is important. Just reading a new research thing that how the brain lights up when people read. And you'll see this on another slide in a minute. But you can get information while driving the car or making a bed or whatever you're doing. And it has very little brain power needed. You hear things in the background as you're going through your day. But education is active pursuit of knowledge. It increases the activity in many different parts of the brain. And during this research they did, they showed how the brain actually lit up whenever in certain regions when the person was reading a book. And the book is measurable physical changes in the brain. And the last line you can't see is that they tested this, that lasted 5 days after the person closed the book. So it makes a difference in reading. It's all about mind. Okay, what are we teaching them? We live in a world that character education is no longer taught because they're afraid. How many agree with that? Okay. This is why I hope. Oh, by the way, they just had a bill come out of committee in Topeka that would set up education funds for other than public school. And I can't remember the exact name of it, but it's about 13 pages long, and they have to go through every little bit and piece to get to the bottom. But that could be good, because the money should follow the child. It shouldn't be just over here, just over here. If you go to government school, we're going to pay for it. No, we're not. We all pay taxes. And then whether, I don't have any children. Well, yes, I do. Two of my grandchildren are still in school. And I've got 4 great-grandchildren coming up. So this I'm really concerned about what's happening in our schools, and now we get back to what it was before. And it was an interesting quote by John Adams. He says, in our country, every encouragement ought to be given to reading and thinking, and therefore diversion should be very sparingly indulged. And I live on a semi-busy street, and we're about 2 blocks from a middle school, and I see the kids walking home, and what they're doing, they're not talking to each other, they're doing this. And I don't know if they're talking to each other or not that way. But it seems like it seems kind of painful. In front of my yard, they were walking by, and there just happened to be a red-tailed hawk sitting on the light pole. Beautiful, beautiful animal. And they missed it. They just missed it. And probably if they were not worried about the cold and they were out walking this evening, they probably missed the beautiful sunset we had in the western sky. And I don't think they're here in that direction anymore, do you? Oh, that's sad. Okay, but we're going to talk about the role of religion, because this was really, really important to the founders. They all believe that religion should be taught, not just, and we'll get into that. Can someone be moral? Because you'll hear these people say, I don't need to get involved with religion, I can be moral on my own. Can they be moral without religion? Why?
It has to come from a higher authority.
Okay. Whose morality are they using? And are they making it up as they go along? If it makes me feel good, it's okay. I thought that kind of thing stopped in the 60s, but no. Religious tenets help people establish a moral compass. And I don't think the compasses are working very well today. Now, we're going to talk about the Northwest Ordinance because that had religion and it had education in it. And this happens to be The one I got hanging on the front of the podium is 1787 when it came out. And it came out under the the Confederate Congress. This is one of the most important things they came up with during their tenure. And because there was one in 1784, which actually started the motion, and then in 1785, it was amended. In 1787 is when it was finally finished. But there was a lot of work that went into this. This was all about statehood and expanding territories. And so during that period between 1784 and 1787, all that land was surveyed. And, George Washington did not go to college, right? You knew that? Okay. He went to surveying school. He was a vocational guy. I love vocational. Anyway, all these were divided up in sections, townships, and so they could be put up for parcels for sale, so people could expand. And it takes a little section of Ohio down here and puts it, expands it, and shows how it went. Those were the different townships. And then the townships were broke down into sections. And so these squares are a mile by a mile wide. Okay? And so one section was 640 acres. And then the halves and the quarters and so on went on down to 40 acres. Remember 40 acres and a mule? That's where it came from. And, but anyway, this was a huge undertaking. But the 16th section in each township was reserved for education, to build school on or to any kind of educational purposes. The 16th section was set aside. And the role of religion in Northwest Oregon is under Article 3 of this document. The objectives to be taught in school was religion, morality, and knowledge. Is that still saying true today? No.
Maybe one of three.
Maybe, yeah.
Well, it depends on how you define religion.
And I invite you to turn to page 76. And right there on page 75, you will see the Northwest Oregon's Article 3, religion, morality, and knowledge being necessary for good government and happy mankind schools, and the means for education shall forever be encouraged. Okay. Now go down to the bottom of the page, it's 76, and then it says, Washington describes the founder's position. And this is in his farewell address. If you ever had a chance to read it, it's long. But if you ever had a chance to read it, you really get to know George Washington. Because he was his farewell address. And he was telling them what needs to be done now. And we should read that before every election to find out what's going on. Anyway, he said, of all the dispensations of habit which lead to political prosperity, religion and morality are indispensable supports. And let us, with caution, indulge the supposition that morality can be maintained without religion. Okay. Reason and experience both forbid us to expect the national morality can prevail to the exclusion of religious principle. That's what he thought. All the founders thought that way, pretty much. But that was his idea. And when you open it up and say, well, we're going to teach religion, which religion are you going to teach? You know? How about whose morality are you going to teach? And so it had to be non-sectarian, and it had to be religious principles of all mankind. Okay? Not just the tenets of a particular sect of religion, but these are universal principles. And over on 76, we read that, and if you go over on the next page, 77, Thomas Jefferson is talking about bill of establishing elementary schools in Virginia. And he said, no religious reading, instruction, and exercise shall be prescribed or practiced inconsistent with the tenets of any religion, sect, or denomination. They were not going to teach about denominations. They were going to teach about what the principles are of a religion. And it goes in actually a bit further. And so where do you find this information? Universal and fundamental principles of all religions that are sound. I'm not talking about all religions. Well, you look at the 5 points, and this is covered on the bottom of 77. For Benjamin Franklin, who was not a particularly religious person, but he says it here in a letter, and I looked up that letter. It's actually kind of long, but he was trying to tell somebody that even though I haven't always practiced this is what I believe. And he went on to say, here is my creed. I believe in one God, the creator of the universe, that he governs it by its providence, that he ought to be worshipped, that the most acceptable service we render to him is doing good to his other children, that the soul of man is immortal and will be treated with justice in another life respecting the conduct in this one. That's pretty well summed it up, the fundamentals of any sound religion. And I think we could go to a Baptist church, a Presbyterian church, Catholic church, and at the bottom of everything, because of the pomp and circumstance, this is what they're supposed to be doing. So this is what Franklin said about the points. And Tocqueville, when Tocqueville came to America in 1831, and I want to take you over to page 80. Now, you can read those sections in between these page marks because they're kind of fill in the blanks. But de Tocqueville was taken by the religious aspects the first thing he noticed. Now, if you were coming to America today, and you've never been here before, would this be the first thing you would notice? Probably not. On my arrival in the United States, I'm reading from first paragraph, page 8. On my arrival in the United States, the religious aspect of the country was the first thing that struck my attention. And the longer I stayed here, the more I perceived the great political consequences resulting from this new state of things.
But don't you think that has a little bit to do comparing 1831 with 2023? There weren't a lot of things to be done in 1831 other than eat, sleep, work, go to church, have friends, and, they didn't have all the different distractions that we have today.
Yeah.
So it is logical that somebody coming here for the first time, they got to get through all the distractions to see that. It's, in my mind, it's not, you can't compare.
Well,
1931 is distinctly different than 2023.
Yeah, I think de Tocqueville was comparing it to working in France.
I understand. I get that.
Yeah.
But I don't follow where you're saying it's like today. It's not.
No.
Yeah. I had someone tell me that they were impressed with all the churches when they took the bus or whatever.
Yeah.
They were surprised at all the church buildings.
De Tocqueville was over here to actually look at our prisons and to tour them and see what we were doing with incarceration. But he wrote this, and if you've seen a copy of Democracy in America, it's about that thick. And he wrote a lot. He had a lot to say. But that was his impression when he first came here. He describes the situation as follows: religion in America takes no direct part in government and society, but it must be regarded as the first of their political institutions. I do not know whether all Americans have the sincere faith in their religion, for who can know the human heart, but I'm certain that they hold it indispensable to the maintenance of the Republican institution. This opinion is not peculiar to the class of citizens or of a party, but belongs to the whole nation, every rank of society. So it was pretty well widespread. Now you got to remember, again, this is 1831. When was the Great Awakening? Do you remember that? Between 1730 and 1740 or 50. And you had some time, you went into a second. But that caused a big deal with the people living in the United States. It really got them. And it was because of the itinerant preachers who were not connected to a church building, but who ran around the country preaching. But all this kind of flowed into a glorious mix. And then you had the Enlightenment during the 1600s, 1700s. And that was a time of finding out about reason. And then you had, that slowly, Jim messed up. Then you had the Awakening, which was an idea of a spiritual revival. And so all this fed in, besides all our history. On one side, they read the Bible, they read Cicero, Tacitus, Locke, Montesquieu, Sidney, and all the philosophers of the day. And on the other side, you had things in their history, the Magna Carta and the Mayflower Compact, and all the way down. And it all comes together, and what this slide is supposed to say is the Declaration of Independence, the American Revolution, and finally the Constitution. All these fed down into this fund. And so that's how we got here, was partly because of the religious fervor at the time. And there was a role of the clergy, and this again Tocqueville makes note of, where he said the clergy fueled the flames of freedom and stressed morality and alerted the citizenry to dangerous trends. And so he goes in and talks about that. At the bottom of page 80, he disagrees with the European philosophers. And the philosophers of the 18th century explained the very simple matter of a gradual decay of religious faith. Religious zeal, said they, must necessarily fail the more generally liberty is established and knowledge is diffused. Just the opposite happened here. And that's the one thing that Tocqueville was making note of too. But the clergy were involved, but they weren't attacked as political opponents. And so they kind of stayed away from that sort of thing, as they should today, and they do. Separation of church and state, but not state and religion. There's a huge mistake on that ruling of the Supreme Court. They alerted citizens that Tocqueville said in this book was, America is great because America, she is good. And when it continues, if it doesn't continue to be good, it will no longer be great. So, now, here's one reason we should be teaching some type of morality in school, because the philosophy in the schoolroom in one generation will be the philosophy in government in the next. Kind of see that today? And then we have guys like Frederick Douglass, who broke the seal. Education means emancipation. It means light and liberty. It means the uplifting of the soul of man into the glorious light of truth, a light by which men can only be made free. Well, religion and the federal government. There was a campaign, and you look at it between 85 and 86, and they were trying to get the religion tolerance that one sect was not superior over another in some way. 7 states had state religions, and they're listed at the bottom. Subject of religion was entirely left to the states. That's what it's supposed to be. On the, let's see here. One is the last thing, page 84, bottom paragraph. The Buffalo was talking here. This is, no, I'm sorry. That's not right. Yeah, it is. This is probably his most quoted summary here. He said, I sought for the greatness and genius of America in her commodious harbors and her ample rivers, and it was not there. In her fertile fields and the boundless prairies, it was not there. In her rich mines and her vast world commerce, and it was not there. Not until I went to the churches of America and heard her pulpits aflame with righteousness did I understand the secret of her genius and the power. America is great because she is good. And he goes on to say that when America ceases to be good, it will cease to be great. But there were some areas in different states where if you were not a particular denomination, you couldn't hold certain offices. And so they were running on a campaign to get rid of that, to make it that religion was not used as a tool. Now, law of separation, and this is why the Danbury Baptist, and I have those letters if you'd like to read those. From Jefferson and the Danbury Baptist. He had wrote him because when he was governor, and he did a day of prayer and fasting. Okay? And when he became president, he refused to do that. And the Danbury Baptist asked him about that, as well as what his idea was about a state religion or a government religion. And he wrote them a very nice return to the letter. And I have those right here. I said, if you'd like to actually read these, I want to put them over here and you can help yourself. And he returned a letter saying the separation of church and state must be part of this. It can't be run by a government. No problem with mixing local areas. He encouraged churches to build buildings next to the school for religious instruction of youth. This is when he founded the University of Virginia. And so I will have those here if you would like to peruse those. Are there any questions up to now? Okay. We'll back up a little bit. See, this is not a new thing. 1100 Charter Liberties. 1100 Charter Liberties was a work of Henry I. Had 14 promises, and one of the promises was that the government will keep their nose out of religion. And that didn't last very long. But that was part of the 1100 Charter. So we had church and state. And one is the principles of the Declaration, the structure of the Constitution. And there's a wall. They want to build a wall between it. Because if you can separate the principles from the structure, what happens to the structure when your foundation is gone? You were building a house and you made a bad foundation, what's going to happen to the house you built on? Now, this was a progressive assault on Christianity, on Christian faith. Because if the progressives for a long time have been trying to separate those two documents because they are attached. And we've gone through that a couple of times, a couple of weeks, about the attachment. Remember, we went through the document on how the grievances in the Declaration are answered in the Constitution. Remember the slides? And so if you can separate the principle from the structure, then it's going to make an easier time of changing government to what you want. Okay? Jefferson in his 1802 letter told them that you have to keep church. But what he meant, and this is the inconsistency of the Supreme Court, is that he used the word state. He was meaning government. He was meaning federal government, not state. Okay? He wasn't trying to take religion out of it has to be a state function. Emerson versus Board of Education, 1947, first applied the First Amendment Establishment Clause to states, and the courts relied on Jefferson's method to make their point.
See, I think they use that letter.
I'm sorry, sir?
I think they use it in a way they know it wasn't meant.
Sure.
When you read the letter, I think he's pretty clear in what he meant, and it wasn't the way they ruled.
Right.
I mean, to me, it just seemed deceitful the way they used it.
Sure. Sure. How about some of the other things the Supreme Court did over the years? Okay, Principle 5. Go to page 95, please. The reality of agreement, self-evident truth. The founding statement is self-evident. The proof is there. You know, everything around them proved it. It's the same thing today. Evolution defies reason, the way they thought. And the founders, down the bottom of page 95, famous essay by John Locke, essay concerning human understanding. That is online. Anybody can read it. It's good stuff. In it, Locke pointed out that it defies the most elementary aspects of reason and experience to presuppose that everything in existence developed as a result of some fortuitous circumstance. And they use the an example here of a watch with all the things that happened in history with the freezing and the thawing and the eruptions and everything on that went up there. It couldn't result in a watch. No matter how much the evolution took place, it couldn't produce this. Okay? And there's a couple other things you can do. The chance will not bring about a watch. Or, if you just look at the way you were made, you will see the difference. And you can take a molecule of water. It's two hydrogens and an oxygen. And the amazing thing about this is a molecule is that those two hydrogen atoms always stay 104 degrees from each other, no matter where they are on the oxygen atom. Who came up with that? God. The evolution defies reason, Locke, the chance of being watched, we covered all that. But there's some other things. How about this? How about the way you're made? The fact that I can hear, not as good as I used to, but I can hear. I can understand what people are talking about. The little bones inside your ear do something. Mental synthesis and states, so little tiny. And then look at the brain. And that's the amazing part. Is everything that a brain functions, how many things the brain can do. And that's fast they can do. They made an estimate on how many connections or how many bytes there are your brain has in a computer. And I'll come to that in a minute. But the eye is amazing. The eye. Something goes into your retina, it's seen upside down in the retina. It goes to down the optic nerve, hits another part which flips it over so you see people standing up. So I don't see you upside down. But all this is important, and all could chance been the way of all that? If you look at the periodic chart, it was like 160 different elements, and they've got so many atoms, so many electrons, and they fit together. Some of them don't. The human brain has a capacity of 1 and 15 zeros bytes. Okay? Now, you can't see the bottom of that, but that's about 47 million volts. Something like that. It is so many hundreds of filing cabinets full of text that you have the capacity. And this research came up with, forget it. I'll think of it in a minute. But Locke's formula was just simple. There is a God. I exist, therefore I am, like Descartes said. Cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. So, I'm something. Something can't come from nothing. So it must be an all-knowing something, and an all-powerful something, superior to everything he created. The Anglo-Saxon word for ultimate good was God. I think they spelled it a little bit different. I think it was G-U-D, not G-O-D, but that was the same thing. And that's, you can look that up on page 96. And these were what Locke attributed to God. He must be a cognitive, reasoning person, entity. He must have compassion and love because we do. We couldn't have got it unless he gave it to us. He must have a sense of right and wrong because we do. Sense of humor. Every time I look at Giraffe, I think, he had a sense of humor. He was a great artist because one year I saw a beautiful sunset. And in the distance, hundreds of things that if one just thinks about it. So, that gets me.
You know, they think that scientists discovered something or other, and they established different theories. And the thing I think I don't understand is that God is the greatest scientist of all time.
Yep.
I love over the years.
What do you think is stopping that? Why do you think they think the way they do?
What's your question?
The scientists. She's talking about the scientists.
Or did you ask? Did you ask a question?
Well, the question is, why do scientists suddenly think that? Or why do they eventually think that?
Why do they think that They are the ones that discovered. They don't believe in God, for one thing.
I think it's pride.
Well, they're discovering something God's already created. Now, whether they, as a scientist, and there's Christian scientists and non-Christian scientists,
Yeah.
admit that or not is up to them. But it's
Yeah.
been refreshing over the years to sometimes hear stories of a non-Christian scientist delving into the studies of the body, as you said, the systems of the body, the mysteries of the universe, and through that, becoming a Christian. Because they'll never get all the answers, and they see that finally, and can recognize the higher being.
Well,
But they have to be willing to let go of their religion that says God doesn't exist, can't exist, don't want him to exist.
Well, if
Therefore, I
that's
have
their
to look
right.
at everything through the lens of how could this be because God doesn't exist?
Right, but again, I'm sure plenty of Christian scientists out there that do that. So it's, I have heard those testimonies over the years of some, but yeah, you have to be humble of spirit and open to that kind of thing, sure.
okay, when they oh, I discovered that. Who are they honoring? Who are they honoring? Themselves. Yeah. What they've done is discover something that was there. That was already there. And it was God. And he's a great artist. Hundreds of things you can think about that would give you. Blackstone said the same thing. And he said that the Creator impressed certain principles upon matter from which it can never depart. And if it does depart from that, it ceases to be. Human laws depend on natural law. There it is. Thus, when the Supreme Being formed the universe, he created matter out of nothing. He impressed certain principles upon that matter, from which it cannot be, it cannot never depart, and without which it ceases to be. Everybody of that time frame, particularly our founders, read Blackstone. He was one of and they read Locke, they read Montesquieu. And Algernon Sidney was the other one they read Locke. Did I tell you about Algernon Sidney? Remember last week we talked a little bit about that? Okay, Algernon Sidney was a martyr for liberty because he had written, and him and Locke were about the same period, and he'd written about that he did not believe kings was appointed by God, the divine right of the kings. And what happened is that he was, somebody read it and gave it to the king, and so he was brought in, and they had really no evidence because it's hearsay. And so they searched his house and found his manuscript where he wrote it, and came up with that, and they killed him and chopped off his head. Locke, being on top of things, he ran to Holland. He got out of there and took refuge in Holland for some years. The natural law being coexistent with mankind and emanating from God himself is superior to all other laws. It is binding over all countries at all times, and no man-made law will be valid if contrary to the law of nature. Doesn't that happen a lot? Now, when somebody makes a rule and it goes against the laws of nature, there's a lot of that stuff going around right now. That's when you do your brain talk, and you're just sitting there talking to your brain, you say, that don't sound right. That's weird. That's what it's all about. Nearness to God. Now, there's a lot of them say that a lot of the founders were deists, but a lot of that is wrong. If you look at their writings and read their writings, you see that they did attribute God into being involved with mankind. You know, what's a deist? What's a deist?
A deist,
A deist.
someone who just believes in God, or a creator.
Yeah, it's like, okay, I created that world and I put all the stuff on it. Now it's up to you. I'm out of it. Okay? God is with us. But again, if you read the writings, some of them that have been tagged deist were not. Well, why would they do that? Why would somebody make that case?
I think it's to get people to, again, like you said, that wall.
Yeah.
They wanted people to stop believing in God.
And if you want to damage or destroy the things they gave us, like the Declaration of the Constitution and you destroy the man or woman who did it. So if you can harm Jefferson's always been a big target, or Adams, then you also degrade everything he did if you put him into that category. But the founders believed that God answered prayers and that he was close and he protected them. And Washington wrote 67 times during the war about the providence of God. He went through battles where he had 4 or 5 holes in his, a little book you can pick up, it's cheap. It's called The Bulletproof George Washington. And 4 bullet holes in his coat that he was not touched. Okay? He was 5 horses shot out from under him, and he wasn't damaged. There was a chief of an Indian tribe that was fighting, and this is in the French and Indian Wars. And at that time, Washington was a captain or a colonel, and he was leading the pack here, and these Indian tribes had good marksmen. And Washington was leading the pack, and they kept shooting, and they were missing him. And so the chief is standing by looking at all this, and he says, "Oh my gosh, don't try to shoot that guy, because you'll never hit him. He is being blessed by God." And so, but 67 times he went through that and never a scratch. In God we trust, our national motto. Now, it's not an idle gesture. If only every piece of money that we have, and requires our people have to take oaths of office. And who do you make an oath to?
God.
Okay. Let me take it to 101 here. Now this is again as Tocqueville. While in America, a witness who happened to be called at a session of the county of Chester, state of New York, declared that he did not believe in the existence of God, or that immortality of the soul. The judge refused to admit the evidence on the ground that the witness had destroyed beforehand all the confidence of the court in which he was about to say. So there was that time when, if you were a non-believer, there were some things that you could not do. And that's in page 101. The presiding judge remarked that he had not before been aware that there was a man living who did not believe in the existence of God. That this belief constituted the sanction in the law which gives binding force, of all testimony in a court of justice, that he knew of no case in a Christian country where witness had been permitted to testify without such belief. As far as taking oaths, you have Article 6, Clause 3, Section 1, and it deals with the oath of offices in the Constitution. Now, what has happened, this is the 1962 ruling that you couldn't have prayer in school. And there's a little bit of, this is real fuzzy, but because this is 1990, so this is how old that is. And we know that crime has gone up, I mean, even now, but I honestly don't remember what was happening in 1990. But this were the things that I found since the 1962 ruling of taking God out of school. Now, I want to be clear that you can still pray in school. Your kids can pray, and you can meet with each other, and they can pray. As long as it doesn't cause a stir. So if you don't like praying, or something like that, you cause a stir when somebody's praying. But kids can still pray in school. It's just that the teacher cannot be leading a prayer in school. Have you heard anything about that? Okay.
We used to give, every year before the kids would go back to school, we would give them a lecture in church on their constitutional rights to pray and carry a Bible in school.
Yeah.
Because we had a lot of teachers who were well-meaning, but they were erroneously telling kids they could not pray in school.
Yeah.
And so, you know, my wife was a children's pastor at our church, and that's one of the things we taught the kids were their rights as Christians, that they can pray in school.
Yes, they can.
And we actually wound up talking to several principals about it.
And there have been some recent cases lately with coaches praying on the field that have been supported. That's a good sign. Maybe we're moving in a different direction. Okay, what is a hegemony? Have you heard that word before? Hegemony? Okay. It is, and I like the third one best. There are 4 different definitions. The third one, influence the values, norms, ideas, expectations, worldview, and behavior of the rest of society. That is my hegemony, let's say. My hegemony would be that I'm a male, that I'm married, I'm white, and all these things. As part of my hegemony, I believe in God, I believe in work. You know, all these things is part of me, my values, my norms, the ideas, the expectations, and my worldview. I've been to some schools and was talking about, they asked me what my worldview was of history. And I said, well, I teach from a Judeo-Christian worldview. And he said, well, you can't do that. I said, why not? If I was doing a class on Japanese culture, shouldn't I mention Shinto? If I was doing something about the Muslim area, I actually lived in a couple of years. Wouldn't I be talking about Muhammad? So why can't we talk about our Christian faith? That makes sense? Yeah. So hegemony is the values of a dominant culture. Okay? The dominant culture sets the hegemony. Okay? And like I said, that's my favorite. And this is where it came from. 1940s, 1930s, 40s. There was and I'll get into this at another session about the Frankfurt School and what they were into and what they were doing. And they were a Marxist group. And Antonio Gramsci was a Marxist. He was from Italy, and he was there during the Mussolini regime. And Mussolini was a fascist. He wasn't a Marxist. And so Mussolini has him jailed for like 17 years. And during that time, he wrote something like 4 or 5 manuscripts, several thousand pages, about hegemony and how this could be the way to control people. Okay? And it is chief through social institutions, churches, schools, things like that. And it's a fascinating piece because you can see what's going on around us. And so what he said is that if we can control, to change the culture, to change the agenda, we have to control the roads. And at that time, the roads were pastors, they wear robes. The judges wear robes. Academics and politicians used to wear robes in older days. And then they added a new one. They have to control the message. If you can control these things here, you can control the message. And now we've added the media. Okay, if we can control the media, we can control the message. And that's what it's all about. Oops. We must understand how propaganda works, because it is all around you. All around you. Propaganda is used to promote particular agendas or points of view. Goals of propaganda can vary. The common goals include shaping people's opinions and convincing them to support a particular cause or a political candidate or encourage them to have some other thing. But we see it every time we turn on the TV. It's called advertising. Right? If you don't buy today, you're going to miss this big deal. And they use scare tactics, manipulating information, stereotyping, appealing to emotions, loaded language, and false statistics. And unfortunately, on our side, sometimes we bend statistics too. So,
Or leave them out.
yeah. And here was a guy who really got advertising going. His name was Edward Bernays. But he is the one we have bacon for breakfast, why women started smoking, and why we use Dixie cups. One of the best advertising men you will ever heard of in your life. And his uncle was Sigmund Freud. So I got some of his craziness legally. But he wrote a book. And this book I would encourage everybody to read. I just gave Bob one tonight, and because this tells a lot about what's going on today. You can relate it. And Propaganda is a very influential book written by Bernays. 1928, incorporated literature of social science and psychology, manipulation into examination and techniques of public communication. He is the guru of public relations. He started that. Yeah. Bernays pioneered the use of psychology, a wide variety of marketing anchors. The reason that how he got women smoking, this is fascinating. He had a group of debutantes in 1928, 29, walk in the Easter parade smoking cigarettes. Now, at that point, women who smoked were not thought of well. But then he did more than that. Lucky Strike came out with a green package. Nice color green. And Bernays had dress manufacturers to start making dresses in that green. And then he had a green party, you might say, where he invited all the leaders of in society. And if they wore green, that same green that was on the back of Lucky Strikes, he would donate to their favorite charity. And so, but all these little minuscule things, and then he put out, he got some stars, TV, or not TV, but movie stars, to come in and tell how the Lucky's is mild, and it doesn't bite my tongue. You know, and they go through this whole thing about how wonderful smoking was. And that's how he got that started. Made a couple of million dollars. But he also, the Dixie Cups, he did a whole campaign around Dixie Cups, and we're still using them today. But it's all about propaganda. And this is a couple of his quotes. He believed this. He believed it. The conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in a democratic society. He said, those who manipulate these unseen mechanisms of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of the country. Okay. If you want to get support for a certain bill, you start advertising all the wonderful things about the bill, leaving out the not so wonderful things. And then you have people talk about it on talk shows, and you have people going on news programs. That's all part of Bernays. That's Bernays. He taught well, but he taught too well. How propaganda works, they question objectivity. They don't want you to think, they want you to buy. Okay? In the last few days, I must have seen 25 commercials about Spectrum. And I flip off the sound of the phone. They cloud or discourage thinking, they stress emotion, they reimagine. Remember how common that word was ever? We're going to reimagine this, we're going to reimagine that. We need to reimagine. And what does that mean when you reimagine something?
Change the image of it. You change the image of it.
Either what's doing is not to my liking, so I'm going to reimagine it. Okay, and the other thing, they instill fear. There's a lot of fear in this. I'm 76, okay? I get letters all the time that I'm going to die soon, that I need to buy this insurance. That's and they capture the narrative, they change the agenda, they change the culture. And they deny transcendence. Okay? And what happens is it's gradual, occasional referencing on a message now and then they increase persistence, repetition, and messaging. And then this is the desensitizing. They want to desensitize you to whatever they're trying to sell you. And this works great in politics, by the way. And the next thing is jamming. You're seeing it all the time. And humans unfortunately fall for that. We're just made that way. And then there's the point of conversion. Okay, human, I'll buy. And it's habituation. This is a way of forming a habit. Okay? Propaganda is intended to brainwash the masses. People get exposed to the same message repeatedly and over time come to believe that whatever nonsense the authoritarians are saying, they want to believe. Okay. No, anybody recognize this guy?
Did he write 1984? Did he write 1984?
I'm sorry, sir?
This guy, is he the author of 1984?
No.
Okay.
He was the author of a lot of stuff. Anybody? Recognize this guy? Okay, maybe you'll recognize him in his uniform.
Doesn't look happy.
Not a happy guy.
Yeah.
He was the chief propagandist in Nazi Germany, and he was the Reich Minister of Propaganda from 33 to 45. And his title was, and you'll love this, he was the Ministry of Public Enlightenment. What a guy. And what he did was engineer persecution, using the things that Bernays wrote about. And Bernays was appalled. He's Jewish. And so you got one of my favorite guys. This is the father of the revolution, Sam Adams. Not the beer. One of the first things when I was doing research, I put in Sam Adams, and I got all these pictures about beer and how great Sam Adams beer was. And so, anyway, how strangely will the tools of the tyrant pervert the plain words, and we see that a lot today. Okay, that's it, folks. And thanks for coming. Next time, and by the way, go Chiefs.
Hopefully.
No. Anyway, what do you think? Give me some feedback. I can't get better if you don't give me feedback.
How many things were discussed that correlates between Christ and the Constitution tonight? How many things were discussed that relate to correlating Christ to the Constitution?
Nothing.
Pardon?
Nothing today.
Okay, just curious. That's what the pastor said on Sunday in advertising this program was come learn about how Christ correlates to the Constitution.
Yeah.
And we didn't get into it.
Yeah, and I think the first 2 or 3 we hit on that. Yeah. I think the people that are here will support that.
We were here the first time and missed too.
Yeah. And, but this one, we had talked a little bit last time at the end of the meeting, some of the things you guys were concerned about just going on today. And the thing I kept hearing is, what do I do about the propaganda? But you wouldn't call it propaganda. You call it something else. And so I wanted to put a little bit about Bernays and Bob and I was talking about Bernays last week. And
I still think we teach morality to a certain extent in school. I think we still teach morality in a roundabout way in the schools.
okay,
One of the schools, one of the preschools in town says, be safe, be kind, be helpful.
sure,
That's morality.
yeah,
They
But
don't
if you
encourage-
teach it without a foundation, you're never going to impress it upon society beyond a small extent.
And I think propaganda, I think it comes from, not propaganda, but home. There's so many single parents now. It's not just the school. I think divorce, I just firmly believe this, that I think it wrecks a family. I've seen it. And I think we can't necessarily blame the schools, because what I've seen the difference is when my children were younger, I would back the teacher. My kid did something wrong, I marched up there.
oh yeah,
And in most cases, you're going to have bad teachers, you're going to have bad doctors, you're going to have bad in every profession.
That really was the foundation that helped the teachers,
Yes.
you know, so when I was, my parents divorced when I was in 1974, I was 4 years old. I was the only kid in my class whose parents were divorced. And we had a girl, about 15 years ago, who told me that she was the only kid in her class whose parents were still married. And that's in one generation, like they were saying, and it's like Goebbels said, give me the children and I would change society. In one generation, we flipped that. And that was from 62 to 74, it was only 12 years. And another thing that chart left off was the suicide rate skyrocketed after that. You know? But yeah, you're right, it does come back to the foundation. And if you look at what they were trying to do, they were trying to destroy the foundations that made our country great, you know, God, family, and all that, and they're doing a good job.
Every society, it comes down to the family, the nuclear family. Because the family, if they're healthy, then the community is healthy, and the state is healthy, and the country is, it has to come down to that, doesn't it? It has to come down to that.
And as far as prayer, this just warmed my heart. Whether it was 9/11, we came together. Damar Hamlin, oh my land, what did they do? They started kneeling and praying. So I do have hope. I have hope that when really bad things happen, what are we doing? But yet, you're right, as far as the government out there, they're trying to diminish that, but when bad things happen, people pray. Did anybody condemn, even on the radio stations, when Damar Hamlin, that happened, they all talked about prayer, didn't they? At least that's what I saw.
Yeah,
And
you
so-
saw it on the
When a
field.
football player is carried off the
Yeah.
field,
Yeah.
then you see sportscasters on NBC bowing their head in prayer, and nobody's gonna complain about that.
That was wonderful.
I know.
That just brought me to tears. So I don't want to be I don't know.
Well, and a lot of
It's not all
times,
that bad.
yeah, a lot of times you have the best enlightenment comes out of the darkest times.
Of course, yeah.
So, and I think my hope is maybe we're there right now. Is that we are seeing a lot of dark stuff, but also have that hope that that's where a lot of your enlightenment comes from, is from some of the darkest times, you know.
I think also that's where the media plays a role. The media is telling us all the dark. We're not seeing all the light because it's not portrayed. You get on Facebook and you see all the dirty, all the bad. You don't see good things. They reject and hide everybody posting good stuff. Like every social media, every media platform would rather hide the good and tell the bad.
They did it on him.
Your 5 o'clock news, well, crime happens on this street, crime happens on that street. When have they ever told, well, thank you for this little child for helping this neighbor? When have they ever told that? They haven't done that for 30 years.
They do every once in a while.
Yeah, once in a blue moon.
If you watch on Friday night.
They do Friday night, every Friday night on CBS News,
At the very end.
Steve Hartman comes on
Oh.
with a story.
It's a great
You
story.
can count on it. Set your clock by it.
We
It's
enjoy
there
every
every
story.
week.
I just like K-Love. They do the happy birthday thing where you're allowed to call in and tell a friend a happy birthday over the radio, or where you're able to call in and do, a good story that you saw someone else do.
Yeah.
So,
No, I think we're hopefully at a point of change where people are starting to realize that some of them smell right. I mean, it's just not right. It's like that brain talk we talked about. Is that when you tell your brain about some of the things that are going on in society today, how many sexes are there now? 16? I don't know.
There are some new ones out there too.
Yeah, but where is the people who are doing the brain talk and say, that's insane. That's just dumb. Why am I listening to this? Yeah, that sort of thing.
Love covers a multitude of sins, and I guess,
But what does that do to kids? I mean, what does that do to children? So when we start saying, oh yeah, that's okay, I guess.
Well,
it
they've
comes from
removed,
parents too.
yeah, if you remove boundaries, kids thrive on boundaries.
because boundaries are not just, you can't go there, boundaries are also, it can't come in. It gives kids safety.
Some of this has been around since
Oh,
human beings.
yes.
Yeah.
I mean, we're always gonna make excuses for ourselves, we're always gonna
Now we know about it.
rationalize behavior. If you sin a little, you rationalize it, then you sin deeper and deeper and deeper, et cetera, et cetera.
Be
That's
compromised.
a human problem.
And so like Solomon said, there's nothing new under the sun.
Yeah.
It just looks different every generation.
And we know what's happening now, because the founding fathers, some of them had some, we didn't know about that, but they had some extramarital relations. We are finding out now, if it's true, or maybe it's not true. John F. Kennedy,
I'm
we
sure
didn't
you're
know
talking-
anything about any of that.
Are you talking about Jefferson by any chance?
I don't know,
Yeah.
but this is just.
Yeah, but
But we didn't know that until how many years ago, or John F. Kennedy, or most of our politicians, or anybody.
Yeah.
With the media now, we know things that everybody kept
Yeah,
secret.
so some very good DNA testing is really throwing that whole thing about Jefferson into question, because his brother was also on the same plantation that he lived. And so there's some interesting things.
Yeah.
And, but, yeah, I look at, what did they give us? Look what they gave us.
well, look at David and Solomon,
That's
both.
right.
Yeah.
But you look at you read the Old Testament time and again, these guys had the same weakness.
Yeah.
And Satan knew what that weakness would be.
And like you say at the onset, there's that human nature and principles never change. It's just which ones you go after. We can't change them until we can sure how to do something about it. But they gave us the basics. They gave us, these are the self-evident truths. These are the things that are, and it's objective truth. It is not subjective truth.
I like to say that I think we kind of did touch on religion today because the founders were religious people. They incorporated religion in the school, even though we didn't get into specific theology. I mean, I feel like we touched on religion today.
I know it did say about Christ in the bulletin, and that should probably be reworded. I mean, we were based on Judeo-Christian values,
Right.
not necessarily what Jesus Christ taught, which is part of Judeo-Christian values, I get that. And just one more thought about all this discussion is the complacency of the Christians and the Christian churches in America. That plays into this. So how deep and dark does it have to get before more people will stand up and try to be a voice of reason and say, there's not subjective truth. Truth is truth. It's not your truth and my truth.
Right.
You can have your beliefs and your opinions, but there is truth is truth. So, I mean, until people are so fed up that we can unite on a local level and start doing what you can. I think it's easy to say, it's too bad and the problems are too big, but if everybody would just do whatever you can do.
The problem is that if you don't tread softly, then I'll sue you.
Sometimes.
As far as this, I got in trouble as a little kid because I loved to read, and we would go on vacation, and my dad said, "Look out the window, Kathy, quit reading your book." So they replaced this instead of, and it's great to read books, but I got in trouble for reading books, and I wasn't looking at the scenery. So I think when we get older, we notice the scenery more maybe, but I don't know, I could be all wrong here. I don't know. But whether it's books or phones, I
You
want
go
to watch
back
it.
to
You say,
cycles in society. I mean, you go back to the Old Testament, though, they went through the same thing with their kings. They'd have bad kings and good kings. They would get to a point where they would fall on their knees and pray and repent.
Yeah.
And God would, and the funny thing is, God might say, hey, I'm going to spare you this, but you're still going to have to pay a penalty for what's happened, gosh, I can't remember. I think it was the second to the last king. they, I think it was Josiah, I get all the kings mixed up, but he said, you're not gonna see this in your generation, but the next generation. And, you know, then comes the next king and Babylon, and next thing you know, they have to pay the penalty for what all the generations had done, you know. So 70 years of captivity.
I have a piece of trivia for you, since you brought up reading again. You actually use more calories